Blake Wynn, my man, welcome to the podcast, dude. It's good to have you here.
Man, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited.
Absolutely. So, Blake, I thought we would kick this thing off, and it's interesting. We'll get into your story a little bit more, but fill us in as like, what did life look like for little Blake as you grew up? Like, what was little Blake doing as a kid?
So when I was really, really young, I lived a lifestyle that I never got to live again. Until I was 7 years old, my parents were married, and my uncle is Steve Wynn, who started the Wynn Resorts here in Las Vegas. And so growing up, it was truly it was extremely luxurious. I was super, super fortunate. I grew up in, a great home. I was the only child between my parents. My first word was Elmo, and I was trying to say limo because that's how I got to and from school every day. Like, it was seriously like out of a movie, like the way that I grew up when I was a really little kid. Being around the leaders of the world and not knowing it, like my mom being like, "Hey, make sure you dress nice tonight. We got dinner with Uncle Steve and his friend, Donald, and it's Trump, or his friend, Michael, and it's Jordan." And it's like, seriously, like that's what it was like when I was growing up. Fast forward to when I was 7, parents got divorced. I ended up being raised by my single mom, and life flipped for me totally on its head. Went from living in truly a 15,000 square foot house. And at the time, it never obviously didn't mean anything to me, but being around these kinds of people every day, limos, this whole thing, to me and my single mom living in a hotel, like, what are we going to do? Like a local hotel, not like a nice, strip Wynn hotel kind of thing.
Yeah, come on, Unc.
And figuring out what to do. And so when I was 11 and she would have been, in her late 40s, we got this set of DVDs, and the DVDs taught you how to do options trading. And so the little bit of money that she was able to get, we learned how to options trade together. I didn't have any money to options trade with, but she started options trading. And since then, over the last 10 years, she's developed a client, list where her portfolio, she does it by herself. It's in the hundreds of millions now, though. Not her money, the money that she manages for her clients.
That she manages.
And she's been great at that. And I've always learned how to do it since I've started making money at a young age. I started investing very early as well because I understood it. And so I always wanted to figure out how to make money, because it wasn't like, my parents didn't want to pay for me to go on dates and stuff like that. It was like I couldn't. So if I wanted to go on a date, I wanted to have an iPad. I remember the first thing I wanted was the original iPad. It came out when I was 11. And so I had like $40 that I got from washing cars, and I took it and I walked into an Adidas outlet that had these shoes available that were $19.99, but it said suggested retail $200. And I was so kind of confused by this. And at the same time, my mom would give me like $5 a day, sometimes like on weekends, to go buy football cards on eBay. I'd buy like these, 86-cent cards with free shipping and stuff. And so I was like, I know how to use eBay. So I bought 2 pairs for my $40. The next day they both sold for like $110 a piece. So I made like $200 overnight, which was essentially 5x my net worth at that time. So it was
as you're 11 years old, deal. You're like way too excited.
Yeah. So started going incredibly, incredibly heavy on that. Ended up being a top rated seller on eBay within a year. Did that for about 5 years. And then that's when I started the YouTube to honestly just try to market my eBay store. And that's when, I would say, the entrepreneurial journey that most people know of that I have was really started.
Right. So let's say we jump back. I'm curious, obviously growing up, there's studies out there, and we talk about this in the podcast, that it's 50% of your patterns as a human are formed at the time you're 5. So by the time you're 5 years old, all of your unconscious wiring, not all of it, 50% of it is started, which is crazy. And so I would be curious, growing up around some just ridiculously people that have done ridiculous things. Obviously your uncle, he's a stud. Hanging out with all these people that are doing incredible things. I'm curious, as you grew up, if you can remember, were there ever any messages or memories or nuggets that you kind of look back in your life and are wow, that one time when blah, blah, blah was over, he always said this thing, or my uncle always said, is there anything like that that sticks out when you were at a young age?
Yeah, it was interesting. I didn't realize, if I put myself back in those shoes, I didn't realize what I was living through and how unique that was. That was all I knew. And also I went to a private school of 55 kids per grade, pre-K through 12 my whole life. And so my best friend is a kid named Ben, who's the grandson of Oscar and Carolyn Goodman, who are the mayors of Las Vegas. And like everyone around me was kind of like this because of this particular school that I was attending. And so like, it really was normal to me at the time. But I think the one thing that I think your audience would find most interesting to know is that I was raised where you were not allowed to do things to make money. I was not allowed to like just do a car wash or do a lemonade stand or do anything like that. I was only allowed to do things if I was trying to be the best at them. So I would play. So I played soccer. I learned how to golf. I was in a bowling league. Like I did a lot of sports because in my head, I was like, well, if all I'm allowed to do is try to be the best at something, like also like, wasn't like, just truth be told, I wasn't sitting there trying to figure out how to earn $5 because money wasn't a concern at that time.
Yeah,
so
sure.
I was trying to get really good. And so when my family would come to games and I'd be playing soccer, I was a midfielder and I did not like being a midfielder. I wanted to be a forward, but I didn't like it because there's so much running all the way back on defense. And I hated playing defense. Running. And there'd be someone who'd be just on the verge of scoring. And from the sidelines, my mom and I are like best friends. Like from the sideline, my mom would be screaming, "Turn on the Jets." And as soon as I heard her say, "Turn on the Jets," it was like my legs could move a little bit faster. And I would stop that guy from scoring and everything like that. And so that principle of like, turn on the Jets has been something that I've really lived with because as I live now in the heat of, a pretty intense entrepreneurial lifestyle, I would say in a lot of ways, like just as it gets that breaking point of like, holy crap, there's a lot of pressure, or wow, this is a big deal, or wow, there's payroll is really high, or whatever it is. It's like, turn on the Jets, do that little bit more, get to the next step, and then you'll be able to grow from there. So I think I learned a lot of principles that you hear being talked about as cliches a lot of times. We're like, do something to be the best, don't do it for money, and all these things, except going to your point, these things were built into me from 5 years old. Yeah. So I've never started a business like, hey, how am I going to monetize this? Everything I've ever done is, how are we going to do something that's the best? And the money is always a byproduct. Like Steve is not really an entrepreneur. Like Steve is a designer. Like Steve is probably at least the way I was raised, like he's probably the best hotel designer to ever live. Like
for sure.
That was his thing. And that's what he wanted his legacy to be. And so truthfully, I don't really want an entrepreneurial legacy. Like I'm an entrepreneur right now, but to me, like being an entrepreneur, quite frankly, is a means to an end. Like right now, my focus is being the best, influencer marketer in the world, because that's what I'm doing. And I think, I'd hope that our clients that do work with us feel that way or are starting to feel that way. Yeah. But the flip side of it is like truly like, I want to run for governor and one day try to make a run for president. Like I've always wanted to have impact on a global scale. And just do it in that way, especially to being around a lot of this growing up.
Yeah. I think it's such a beautiful lesson to look at too, is it's like, as we try to figure out our life and go through our life and wonder what's next, I think a lot of the time we do go to what's the monetary thing or what's the way that I'm going to survive. And it's interesting. I just got done doing this 5-day challenge and it was called like the Find Your Future Challenge. And it was all about like, how do we figure out what we want to do with our life? And one of the things we talked about is that, like at the end of the day, there really isn't a safe route. You know what I mean? It's like you could 100%. Pursue money and you could do this because it's going to provide food on the table for your family. But like at the end of the day, you look at COVID the last year, so many people that took the safe route realized that there was no safe route in a really, really painful way. And I think the way you approach it is such a gift to anybody that's listening to this, that it's like, what is the thing you think you want to do with your life? And don't look at it monetarily, but look at how can you become the best thing at that. And if you become the best thing at that, by default, when you're the best, you add lots of value. And when you add lots of value, the money comes innately. So I just think that's it's a really good way to look at it. Do you know why they told you to be the best? Because I was a kid, I did lemonade stands and shit growing up.
And look, by no means am I knocking at like that's how you learned entrepreneurship, right? Like everyone learns entrepreneurship differently.
Totally. I'm just curious.
I think my parents' ideology was, first of all, at the time, it was probably like, you might not need to earn a lot of money in life. Like we're probably going to have it for you, so just figure out what you could be the best at. And if you're, if there's a byproduct that's financial there, great. If not, maybe that's also great. I don't truly know. And it's honestly probably a great question for me to go back and ask my parents, like, hey, why did you raise me this way? But I think, holistically, it creates like a super like unique feel to my entrepreneurship journey, because like for me, like when I hear entrepreneurs talk about failure, for example, and how like, yeah, you just pay for lessons and it's cool and all that stuff. To me, I've never understood how people can get convinced of that. It's okay to fail if you're trying your best. Like I get it. But I think this concept of being okay with failure and stuff, like I think that's a horrific concept for an entrepreneur to have. Like because if you're okay failing, that means you're willing to accept not being the best. I also don't think that, you know, like to me, my least favorite part about having a business in general is the selling, right? Like I don't think you should ever sell anyone anything. I think if you're the best, people are going to buy it. And if you're not the best, people aren't going to buy it. And if you're not the best and you're caught up in selling, then you're selling people on something that they could go get elsewhere and get a better result for it. And I don't think that that's the right thing for any entrepreneur to do. And so I think failure, I think, is a byproduct of chasing money. Like I think you can attack any failure as the reason you failed is because you were going after money, you weren't going after an idea, and you, more importantly, weren't going after being the best. And I think that, you know, like maybe it was just a personality type that my uncle and my family have, but being the best is what's cool. Like having a bank account is not what's cool. Like everyone around him has a bank account, right? Like Steve has a bank account. So does Jordan. So does Trump. So does, you know, I mean, like his friends are absolutely wild. And I don't necessarily want to go on a crazy tangent about Steve, but like, like, you know, like I've just never really understood too, like what the glam is around it. And granted, I've had the luxury of really the worst part of my life in terms of what my financial situation looked like was from the time I was like 7 years old to like 11. So I was probably too young to really understand how bad it was. But by the time I was 13, like I was making $70,000 a year reselling shoes on eBay part-time while I was going to 8th grade the rest of the time. And so like I personally never had financial concerns because I personally had the money since I was younger to be able to do those, you know, choice making freedoms that, you know, everyone says that that's what money's for. Like that was the other thing I always learned was like money is just a choice. Like if you want to fly private somewhere, you have to be able to afford it. But if you have enough money to afford it, you can choose to go private, first class, coach, drive, train, or not go at all, right? Like how many choices do you want to be able to have in life? The more money you have, the more choices you can make. And if you want that money, you have to just be the best at something.
Yeah. It's interesting too, because I grew up not in quite the same situation, but I grew up in a situation where like my parents didn't go around and like say, oh, we got to worry about this bill or that. Like I grew up in an environment where it was like money wasn't talked about, at least in front of me, where it was like an issue or things like that. And it's interesting as I've gone throughout my life, someone once told me this way of looking at money, and I thought it was such a perfect way of talking about it, is that it's like if you had a friend, for example, that every time you were around that friend, you were stressed out, you were freaking out, you didn't really have a good relationship with that friend, then that friend would never want to come around you. And it's like, sometimes we go throughout life and we're so stressed about money. We're so frustrated with it. We hate money. It creates all these problems in our life. And we have such a poor negative relationship with money that obviously money doesn't want to hang out with you. And it's like, obviously, we were both fortunate in the sense that we grew up in a way that I'm sure if you're struggling to pay the bills and all that, it's harder to make that shift. But I think one of the beautiful things for anybody listening to this can start to take on is it's like, if you can develop a beautiful relationship with money that you go, you know what, I don't need to worry about it, or money's not going to be an issue. It allows you to, for example, pursue things, become the best, pursue something because you like it, add value, do all these different things. And then eventually money goes, oh, this dude's not upset with me. This dude's not frustrated with me. If anything, this dude knows that by having me, he can impact the world more, that she can have more choices to create more abundance in the world. Like, and then money's going to naturally want to come to you. But it's like, you got to have a healthy relationship with money.
And you know, and I think part of the problem too is I think, you know, financially, like you are set up to fail, right? Like, and with social media, it's 10 times worse than it ever was before. Like whether if you go to college and you take $250,000 out in loans, like financially, like you are set up to fail. You might not, but they're, you know, like you're set up to fail, right? Like if it's, you know, as it comes to business, for example, like a lot of entrepreneurs, like I'm not talking about like, there's one level where it's like they rent Lambos and they take pictures in front of it. And that's the whole gist. And it's like more about just putting on a persona, being an entrepreneur as if it was some sort of celebrity, like taking that corniness out of it, because like those people are the bottom of the totem pole of entrepreneurs. Like they probably honestly have a 9-to-5 job at a relatively minimum wage kind of job, but they're just putting that out on social. Yeah. And then the problem is if you do look at the Grant Cardones and the, you know, people like that who are kind of like famous entrepreneurs, it's like you want to replicate that. The problem is what's easier to replicate? Creating this business that does incredibly well for 10 years and has all these different ups and downs, or buying the same watch that he's wearing and then trying to make it look the same. So it a lot of people, I feel like, try to take the path of least resistance to get somewhere, except they're only getting somewhere optically. They're not getting there in practice. And because they're not getting there in practice, they actually don't have the money. So these money concerns is because, you have a watch that you can't afford, and you live in a place that's too nice, and a car that's too expensive with too low MPG. And like, people are not also taught to be responsible with what money they have and how to budget and how to do those kinds of things. And, you know, if you, and I see it firsthand, like this is not like a PSA to anyone who earns, you know, 50,000 a year or less. This is like I work with athletes who earn 8 million a year who can't figure out how to save $10. Like I see it in any walk of life. If you don't know how to manage your money and how to be effective with it. Like I just had a call earlier with someone where I was explaining how, you know, I have some nice artwork, for example, and I was explaining to them how I was borrowing money against my artwork to make an additional investment. Every single part of that is generating cash flow for me, and it's totally separate from the business that I run as a whole, and it's very low risk. And I'm doing it because I understand that money is a tool and nothing more. Yeah. They might not be so likely to do it because it's, well, I don't want the bank owning 10% of the thing that's on the wall in my living room. And then the cash they're giving me, I'm going to have to pay back a little interest. But I'm like, you don't understand, like with the right investment, you pay back maybe 1% to maybe even 8% if you have just trash credit, 8 to 10% loan, right? If you can jump into something that makes you more than 8 to 10%, it's still a win. And if you do that at scale for years, like it's not that hard to end up like having the financial situation that you'd probably want in order to, you know, live the life that you want. Like I don't normally regurgitate Gary V sound bites. Like I love Gary. He's a personal friend of mine, like love what he does. But I think one thing that he says that's awesome is you buy stuff that you don't want really to impress people who you don't care about. So your life can be 10 times more financially challenging. Something along those lines, what he says all the time. And he's so right. And that's what they do. And that's why the CEO of Rolex and the CEO of Gucci and all these people are so wealthy, and you want to be like them. And you're the reason why they're like that.
Yeah. It's crazy. And I think one thing too that people can take from what you're saying here is it's like the importance is like whatever you're doing with your money, like start now. You know what I mean? Like so many times we go, well, when I'm financially doing better or this or that or the other, then I'll create the habit to like save money or invest money or do this. And like you said, you work with some athletes that they make millions of dollars a year. And because they didn't establish that habit in the beginning, now it's like you just have more money to have more issues with. And then, so there's a whole thing that's spread out there. But what I would love to do is, so let's jump back into your story. So definitely some unbelievable things there, but you go throughout your life and you're, I think it was 12, 13 years old. You start the shoe business, 13 years old, you're making 70 grand a year. You eventually start YouTube and your YouTube pops off. And what I would love to hear from your story is kind of two parts. One, and you can tell me if this answer is different than I think it will be. And everything you've done, whether it was eBay selling shoes, whether it was YouTube, whether it's what you're doing with the sports agency and marketing agency and influence marketing now, everything you've done, you've risen to the top and you've done exceptionally well at. And my belief is that you have some sort of a system, you have sort of something, which is the way that it's like a program that you have in you, that if I dropped you in the middle of anything, you're going to find a way to raise to the top. My belief of what your answer might be is because you're always focused on how do I become the best. If it's a different answer, let me know. And then kind of the second thing is I would love for you to share with everybody, like, how did you go from being on YouTube, crushing it there, to all of a sudden you're like this YouTube influencer, to now you're in the sports world, you're working with pro athletes that are like, obviously professional athletes doing exceptionally well. Like, so kind of two-part question.
Yeah. I mean, I think, yes, it is in pursuit of being the best, but truly I've always believed like, it was just like, like there'd be little things, like if something was going wrong in school, for example, like, and I would tell my mom about it. My mom would be like, well, don't just take this sitting down, like figure out how to fix this. Whether it was, I got a bad grade, but or I had a disagreement with a teacher. It's not like don't take anything ever. Like be relentless about getting what you feel is right. And I felt like it was right, I suppose, for me to be the best sneaker reselling store on eBay, because everyone on eBay was selling fake shoes, or a lot of people were selling fake shoes, and they'd have bad feedback and things like that. I had over 100 transactions a month on eBay, not 99.9. I had 100.0% positive feedback. I had to give refunds when I thought it was crap. I had to give partial refunds for what I felt like was no reason, but I did it so that way I could maintain 100% positive feedback, because that was what your reputation is on eBay behind your screen, was your feedback count. And I was not okay with 99.9. I wanted 100, and I was relentless about it. And so when it came to the YouTube thing, I was not trying to be the best YouTuber when I started. You gotta understand, there was no such thing as YouTuber at the time. There was no Jake Paul, there was no Logan Paul, there was Viner. You could be a Viner, but there was like people like PewDiePie, like there was some big YouTubers, but I wasn't into YouTube. I didn't care about it. I wanted to market my resale business, because from 2015 to 2016, like I made basically the same amount both years, and I didn't grow as I had previously. And so I started reaching out to, pages and blogs and Instagram and things like that I thought would be effective marketers of my business. And they wanted so much money that I was like, forget it. I'm going to do it myself. So my early YouTube videos are me showing my shoes and being like, hey, this is a size 12. It's $650. Here's my PayPal. Like, let me know if you want to invoice to buy them. And I'm like showing my inventory. I didn't really understand how it worked, but I saw there was a series that a channel called Nice Kicks used to do, where they would go to celebrities' homes and show their sneaker collections and have the celebrity do it. And they got crazy views. And I was a fan of this particular content strategy. And so I was like, I have a pretty crazy collection. Granted, it was an inventory. It wasn't a collection. Like I wore some stuff here and there, but it was mainly just inventory. But I was like, this would be cool. So I made a sneaker collection video on both my channel as well as a big sneaker YouTuber's channel, because they thought it would be great content. And those two videos combined for over 1,000,005 views. And 45 days after starting my channel, I had 10,000 subscribers. And, I went to Nike Town at the Grove in Beverly Hills. And this kid comes up to me and he goes, "Are you Just Wynn?" And at first I was like, what is he talking about? Like, what is Just? And I'm like, oh crap, that's my YouTube channel. I was like, yeah, that's me. He's like, man, I love your channel. Can we take a picture? And the second he asked me for a picture, everything in my brain flipped. Like that was the moment I was done being a sneaker reseller. And I was like, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to pave a lane that allows this to be, sustainable. And granted, there were sneaker YouTubers that were bigger than me at the time. But for me, I was like, these ones that are bigger, there's no reason that they're bigger. I have crazier connections because I used to sell to athletes, because, they would they would find me on eBay. Like I'll never forget, like one day I got an order in for a pair of like these Reebok shoes, and the shipping label said Marquise Lee on it. And I was like, I know. I wonder if that's the same Marquise Lee that plays football for, he was a rookie at the time for the Jacksonville Jaguars. So I messaged him through eBay. Hey, are you Marquise Lee from the Jaguars? He literally messaged me back on eBay. He was like, yeah, I am. And I was like, holy crap. So in the box, I don't even remember. I think I went to the Nike outlet and I bought like a pack of socks. I just like threw it in there for free. And like I hand wrote a note, like, thank you, like really into football. I got your rookie card, like the whole thing. So the whole time I was still a really big football fan. So doing that was really cool. My mom ended up joining a book club with a woman named Melissa Victorino, who is the wife of a baseball player named Shane Victorino, who was a superstar for the Red Sox or Phillies at the time. And he is diehard into shoes. So I started selling to him, and then I started buying shoes from him. And it just turned into this whole thing where that was really fun for me. But at the same time, like someone wanted a picture with me, like now I am that person. And I always had this feeling towards celebrities where I was like, why are you guys such assholes? Like, why is it that when people ask you for a photo, like you aren't, it's not a knee jerk reaction to say yes. Like I understand like not having privacy sucks, but the flip side of it is the reason that you have a boat and a plane and all these things is because of these people who want a photo.
Totally.
And so when I realized I had an opportunity to be in those shoes, I wanted to take it. Problem was I didn't know what being the best looked like because there was no such thing at the time. So I kind of defaulted into consistency. And in the next 100 days, I posted 99 videos. So basically vlogging every day. It was between my sophomore and junior year. And I mean, to even take it one step farther back than that, I actually had no interest of ever marketing on YouTube. I didn't know it was a thing. And I had an intro to economics teacher who I was very close to. He knew about my business. And he said, instead of taking the final, I will allow you to make a business plan and submit that as your final. I said, Enriquez, I'm not making a business plan. I already have a business. He's like, well, make a business plan for something that could go tangentially to your business. And so I did this YouTube business plan. The semester ends, first day of summer hits. And I'm like, you know what? Like, there's some merit to this business plan. Like, let me just mess around for 3 months and do it. So it was kind of the YouTube thing, kind of just marketing my sneakers, kind of just figuring out what was going on. Really felt like I got the swing of it. And then about 5 months later, a check came in from Google for $400. And my mom and I thought it was a scam to get my banking info because I was like, why is there a check from Google? I find out it's from YouTube. I went nuts. I didn't know you could get paid on YouTube. I went nuts. Like I said, I actually truly did not start this as a business. 2 weeks later, a $2,300 check shows up. I'm like, whoa, okay, like that's not nothing. Like that's 2 weeks, $2,300. That puts me on pace for 40, 50, 60,000 a year. I mean, that's not nothing. And once I realized that, plus at this time too, like, you know, I'd go to the mall and 10 kids would stop me for a photo. Right. I would, you know, go to a sneaker convention and I could make 100 shirts with my name on it and sell them. Like there was starting to be some real traction there. And I was just having as much fun as I've ever had. And don't get me wrong, I had so much fun with all the other stuff, but this was like another level of fun. Like this was like, you know, going back to my story, this is a 16-year-old kid who financially has done pretty well for himself. I mean,
for sure,
1% of 16-year-olds, you know, like the whole thing, like I get it, but you know, it was still in the context of the same 55 kids, pre-K through 12, still just me and my, you know, single mom, still just, you know, still just the same Blake that was just trying to be the best at something. And it was just so fascinating to me, the response this was getting, because I was literally talking about sneakers. And it was so cool to me because the whole time, like since I was 4 years old, if you would ask me, what do you want to do when you grow up? Like it was president. Like I would always say president. That's always what I wanted to do. And the reason why was to be able to have a level of impact on people that was larger than any business could ever support. And you know, having that happen in a really small degree with YouTube, I mean, really like lit me up. And so like, I truly, for about the 3 years I was on YouTube, on average, I probably slept an hour and a half a night. I was still maintaining school. I was applying to colleges, taking the SAT. I was playing varsity golf and I actually won state in that. Like I was really busy, but I got very good at time managing 15 different projects with the same 24 hours every day. Sleep got put on the back burner. I'm not as bad about the sleep thing anymore. But now as problems come up, I think I have a different appreciation as well for hours in a day, which I think is another tip that I always give to people is like 8 hours in a day is not a lot when you're selling it for dollars, and 8 hours a day is not a lot if you're not into what you're doing. But man, if you're into it, you can plow through these, you know, 15-minute meetings like they're nothing and you love it. And then you can go from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. every night and work is just life, you know, like that's like, you know, I'm fortunate enough now, like my girlfriend, like she understands it and like she loves it. And so like work is life. Like we go to like last week I had to go to Boston for 13 hours to secure. Alesso was making an investment in one of the small businesses that I'm on the advisory board for. So I went to Boston for 13 hours to help secure Alesso's investment in that company. It was 6 hours to Boston. We stayed at the hotel for 6 hours, slept, went to this nightclub, woke up in the morning, first flight home back to Vegas, straight from the airport to the office because I had some other things going on. And like that's not like, holy crap, that what a work ethic. Like, I don't want any sympathy for it. I love it. I don't want to trade that for anything. And like,
Yeah.
in the meantime, like, yeah, there's money being made, but none of the stories that I tell people are like, yeah, and then I got this check, and then I got this, financial opportunity. Like no one cares. Also, like, my friends all have it too now, right? Like, I'm friends with founders and CEOs and things like that, because those are the people I have the most in common to. And if you were talking about money to them, some of them would be like, okay, you're still nothing. And then some of them, it's like, like, there's no reason. No one looks at it that way. Everyone's there for a reason. Everyone's, started something that's worked because they all have, in some way, shape, or form, similar principles.
Yeah. And it's like such a thing I preach too, is it's like, you never work a day in your life if you love what you do. And it's like, the craziest part is like, there is, for every single person, I believe, in the world, like, there is that thing for you that feels like it's not work. And if you can find what that thing is, you will never work a day in your life. But the thing that happens is, for a lot of people, unfortunately, eventually they get to a point of settling where, maybe there were some speed bumps and all these different things, and you kind of give up and you go, well, maybe I'm just meant to live a life where I live paycheck to paycheck, or like whatever it is. But the secret is, it's like, one of my mentors, Tony Robbins, who you may be familiar with because your uncle, but he always tells a story about like the first time a kid started walking. It's like, if you had a kid and they fell down 100 times, like at no point did you go, all right, this kid's just not a walker. Like, just give up, dude. You're not going to walk. Like, you're like, no, he will try until. And it's like, wow, that's the perfect formula. That's the formula for success. Like, in life, try enough times, get up, fall down, get up, fall down, get up, fall down, until eventually you find your lane where you don't work. And so I think I'm 100 gajillion% on that same page with you. And so, couple last questions I have for you. One thing that I'm curious is, obviously you grew up near your uncle, and two things that I'm curious. One, was there a piece of like advice that you learned from him as a kid, or you took from him? Maybe it was to be the best, and that's it. And then on the flip side, now obviously you're doing super well in business. You're deep in the entrepreneur world. I would have to imagine that there's conversations you now have with him that are very different than conversations a decade ago. So I'm curious, like, in the beginning when you were just a kid and who knew what your path was going to be like, did he say any things that stuck to you? And then now, kind of similar.
So, okay, so it's really funny. So, and not to get too personal, but I don't really mind sharing it. And honestly, I'd almost rather share it. Yeah,
please.
One thing that is super, super important to me is that I've never taken $1 from Steve, directly or indirectly. And like, that is super important to me, because since I was a young kid, being the best, deep down, like, just being honest, like, being the best meant being the best to win. And the bar is set pretty fucking high, but
super high.
I want to be the best win. And,
Let's go.
So from the time I was 7 until I was 16, I did not talk to Steve one time, because when my parents got divorced, like I said, I went with my mom. Steve is my dad's brother. So gotcha. I just didn't talk to him. Like, there's no bad blood. I just didn't talk to him. Like, I was 7. It's not like I could call him up. Hey, look, what's good. Yeah. Like, I didn't have a phone, like it was different times. Like, 6-year-olds didn't have phones back then. So, it's funny because the first time I spoke to him was Meadows, which was the school I went to, had found out about my sneaker reselling business and kind of the magnitude of it, because I'm pretty sure my economics teacher shared it with the, administration. And they said, hey, we're going to have the Review Journal come in and do a story on you. And it's going to be part of like something they're doing is like part of a school series. Like, so they're going to ask you some questions, and that's that. And I was thinking, okay, cool. Like, never done an interview. That'll be fun. Yeah. I didn't know when reporters ask questions, like, they're going to print what you answer. So he asked me questions like, so how much do you make? I just told him. And he's like, so like, what have you done with the money? And I was like, oh, I just bought a Mercedes for myself when I turned 16. And I just did this and I just did this. And he's like, so like, what, he's like, as it pertains to your uncle. And he asked me a very similarly worded question. And he was like, so like, as it pertains to your uncle, like, how does that, make you feel about your legacy, or, something like that. And I said, by the time I'm done and I'm on my deathbed, Steve will be remembered as my uncle. Now, fast forward 3 more days. On the cover of the Sunday paper, the front page of the Sunday paper, it's actually It's right there behind me. It says success in the jeans or the sneakers. And it's a picture of me in front of my shoes at home. And it ended up being a 3-page article on the cover of the Sunday paper. And in real big, bold, blocked out, it says, by the time I'm done, Steve, remember my uncle and all this stuff. And
Oh, no.
so later that day, and I'm getting calls from friends and family. I'm 16 at the time, so I have a phone at this point. I get a call from a number I don't even have saved in my phone. Hello? Is this my nephew? Who's this? It's your Uncle Steve. I saw you had an interesting piece come out in the paper today, and I literally not talked to him in 10 years. I'm like, Steve, how are you? Like, how's everything been? It's so nice to hear from you. And I was like, crap. Because Steve's, just truth be told, like, Steve's kind of notorious for his temper. Like, people know that Steve is not necessarily the calmest of souls. And I was like, crap, he's going to take my head off. Like, I was like, here it comes. He was like, do you really believe that? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, good. I want you to come and meet and we'll have dinner tomorrow. So I literally saw him the next day. And that was when we rekindled our relationship. He actually did appreciate me saying that because, from his perspective, and I can only assume this, but from his perspective, I'm the last one with the name, and the name is what he spent his whole career building. And that's what he put on it because, he's got one sibling who's my father, who's 70 years old. And I'm one of 3. I have 2 half siblings, and they're both in their, late 30s. So they kind of have done what they've done, and they do, they're fine and everything, but they're not doing what Steve has done. Right. And, he has 2 daughters who both got married and changed their last names. And so I'm the last one. And so I think, he wants to point me in the right direction with things and totally. Just kind of, I think more than anything, I've had the luxury of being able to observe, which has been awesome. Like a couple of years ago, I think 2 years ago, I went to Palm Beach to spend his birthday with him. And his birthday dinner was 20 people around a nice dining room table. But, on one side of him is Annette Huffington who started Huffington Post. And then on the other side is a woman named Andy Phipps, whose family owned Secretariat, the horse that had the big movie and the whole thing. And so she's got a triple crown. And then, the next guy is one of the biggest art dealers in the world. And then, the treasurer of the United States is at the other head of the table, it's just like getting those experiences and listening to them tell stories and how they interact with one another. It's taught me a lot about, building friendships with the people who you may do work with or you may not. But it's been just a blessing to have that, and I know that that's something that not a lot of people get to have, but, as much as this all, sounds great, like I've definitely had like some really, really low moments, especially in business where it's like, oh crap, like never mind being the best. It's like, right. Like, what do you do? Like there's failure moments all the time. And I think for me, I've gotten a really clear understanding of how much you can do in an extended period of time. Like I don't get caught up in what does this weekly report say or this monthly report or whatever it is. I look at it like, all right, like I'm 21, like I got 80 years. Like I got 60, I got for real 59 more years probably to do what it is, if I'm so lucky as to stay healthy. Like I got 59 years to build this. So if I don't move the needle in what seems like a lot in 14 days, I'm not sitting there panicking. Like some people who start companies, it's like if they're not cash flow positive 4 months in, they're panicked and they're going to go back to their jobs and stuff. And like, I get it. I've just never been that way.
Yeah, you're looking long term. So if people want to see what you're up to, Blake, I know obviously you're kind of all over with a lot of things you're doing and your YouTube, Instagram, all those different things. But like, if people want to get more info on you and see what you're up to, where's the best place for them to find you?
And I mean, I would say probably Instagram. Instagram is really the only social media that I keep up with. Like, honestly, like I'm just so busy now. Like I'm terrible with all my other socials. Like I've really fallen off the whole influencer train. So I would say Instagram at @just_win. You can go on my company's website, enclavekey.com, and you can reach out through there if there's anything, worth reaching out for. But, in general, I think, people will likely be watching out for me a lot more in probably 5 to 6 years as I make, my run for office, as opposed to right now while I'm, setting the framework to do so.
Heck yeah. Heck yeah, man. So one last question I have for you. It's a question we ask all our guests because we want to help people find direction, but do it through like action in our life. And so I would be curious, what would you say is one thing someone listening to this can do in the next 24 to 48 hours to start finding direction in their life?
Can I tell it with like a small little story?
Please. Yeah.
I think
Floor is yours.
I think your audience will really appreciate this, and I think I've probably come across in this episode as just this rich kid that figured out how to do business because he saw it, and so like I think this will maybe help. Like I knew that I did not want to do YouTube anymore in the spring of 2018. I'd been doing it for a couple of years. I had about 400,000 subscribers at the time. I was about to become a freshman in college. I just had no desire to do it anymore. I think the ego stuff had gotten to my head. Like I had more money than I had ever had before. And so I basically quit YouTube, but I was able to kind of still have the minor celebrity lifestyle that came with it because I had the money and I wasn't, 2 years removed like I am now. Like I don't live any celebrity lifestyle now, but back then I still could, be recognized and get, tables for free at clubs and things like that. So I spent the summer between my senior year of high school and college. I spent $150,000 in 90 days partying and traveling. And when I saw what that did to my bank account, it really put me in a spiral of like, okay, I need to like get my head out of my ass and figure out what I'm going to do. And so to answer your 24 to 48 hour question, what I did, and I would say that was the lowest point in my life. Like I was like, truly, like I was probably a borderline alcoholic at that point. Like I was drinking almost every day. Granted, it was like for 3 months, like it was 90 days. So it was very easy to snap out of, which is why I wouldn't say alcoholic. Cause like I would just like stop drinking. Like it was not that hard. And I ended up reaching out to the people I was closest to and just talking to them, like not about like, hey, what should I do? Like literally just talking to them. And I reached out to a buddy of mine whose name is Hayes Pillard. He was a linebacker for the Chargers at the time. And I literally just reached out to him. I was like, hey man, how have you been? He's like, oh, I've been good. And I sent him a game of 8-ball. So for about a week, we played 8-ball back and forth. And after that, he had asked me if I could help get him a sponsorship deal with one of the companies that had still sponsored me at the time. And I was like, yeah, sure. And I got him the deal. And he's like, this is huge. Like I'm making money off the field. And then I got him a couple more deals with some of the other companies I worked with. And he was like, hey, I got a buddy who I went to college with who's on the Cowboys. His name's Antoine Woods. He knows what I've been doing with you and he wants to see if he can jump in on this. I was like, yeah, sure. And I got Antoine a couple deals and he's like, hey, I got this guy. So at that point, it all of a sudden clicked. This was over the span of about a week. It clicked for me. I was like, because I got like all these deals done in a week. It was easy. I called up the CMO of these companies and I was like, hey, like one of my good buddies is an NFL player and he wants to work with you guys. Like, will you do it? And they were all super interested. They're like, yeah. And so the reason I tell that story is because there are times where you don't know where to turn, but if you turn in the right direction, if you turn in the right direction, it's as simple as a game of 8-ball that started on Clavin Key to what it is today. He is now since retired from professional football and he's actually our president of athlete marketing in-house, funny enough. So he recruits all the athletes for us. One of my best friends growing up dropped out of college alongside me and is now the COO of the business. And now we've got, 20 employees and over 80 clients that we work with. And all of that is because of just texting people who, they're in your contact list. They might not be your best friend, but it's someone who, just talking to them makes you feel a little better. Like I felt better talking to Hayes because I was a Chargers fan and Hayes was a Chargers player. Like I was going through one of the lowest points of my life. Just playing 8-ball with him made me feel better. And it gave me that much clarity to be able to see the little tiny pinhole vision of like, I could help these guys get these deals. And again, this is just my personal story, but 24 or 48 hours, just everyone's got that one contact in their phone or handful of contacts in their phone and it might not be, celebrities or anything like that, but it might just be, you might have an uncle who you don't talk to a lot, but when you do, he's kind of a funny uncle and he'll lighten you up and you just need a little tiny something a lot of times that'll open up the course of something that you couldn't even imagine. So for me, it would be reaching out. Another thing that I think you can always do in 24 to 48 hours. Like I am not a believer in absorbing content from entrepreneurs, which is why, like I said, like I'm not knocking those people. I just don't think that that's what people should be doing at scale. But what I do think you should do is if there's something that you're actually trying to learn about, like look that up. Like if you're trying to figure out like how to start a business, like listen to pieces about how to start a business. Don't go listen to like, Gary talk about what it's like running an agency with 800 people. You're not there. Go listen to a podcast like yours, where you're talking to, entrepreneurs who are sharing the really early days and struggles of their story. And just as you're listening, you almost want that to become white noise, and you want to be thinking about yourself. Like the best podcasts are the ones that turn into white noise halfway through. You're listening, but you're applying everything that you're hearing to yourself. And, so doing a little bit of that. But also I think like you kind of already lost if you're trying to fix your life in 24 to 48 hours. And that's exactly the problem, is like people are super, super caught up on what can I do right now? It's like you can do stuff right now, but whatever you can do in 24 to 48 hours, essentially don't expect its impact to last any longer than that, right? Like the amount of time you put in is equivalent to the amount of impact it'll have. 3 years in a business should lead to 3 years of impact. Like that's it. Like 3 years of business should not lead to 55 years of prosperity. Like you're crazy if you think it will.
Quick question. What is a game of 8-ball?
Oh, so like the iOS, like the game pigeon game, like you like billiards through text message. Okay, like the game pigeon game.
Okay, I was like, I don't know if I never heard of the game 8-ball, so I was just curious. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Heck yeah, man. Okay, cool. Well, Blake, it has been an honor, man, to have you on the podcast. I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. Thank you for the wisdom, the knowledge, man. I know you've done a lot and you have a lot more to do. So I'm excited for all of us to see you keep crushing it. And again, man, thank you for being on the podcast.
Man, thank you for having me. You've got a fantastic platform, and hopefully for everyone listening, this was helpful. I'll have to do it again soon. I'll have to get you on mine or something.
Absolutely, man. Let's get it.